and then I won't have to, I'll know you're in the middle of something. But
I'm taking notes.
Okay, good. I want to bring you on because I know, like Charlie, you have been in the system. You've seen what, you've seen what great administrators, great education, people who are inside the system who care about those kids and will do anything to make sure that the children in their schools leave their schools and they can read and write and do math so that they have an education of opportunity. And that even among, circumstances where there is bullying, where there is life-threatening situations, you have been in a situation where you have seen where a great group of people working in a school district and in a school can do amazing things. When we hear what is happening and the how the system has been locked in place to take control out of the hands of those local district officials who truly do care about those kids, what happens to those kids in those school districts where all of this, where the focus is no longer about academics and the focus is on all of this social emotional, and you put teachers and people in a position that they are not, I know we talked about it with Anna before, they are not licensed, and in fact, in the past, have been trained to be so careful about data that is put in on a student's file as not to destroy the life of that children. What are your thoughts? And maybe I'm asking you questions you don't want to go, and you have something else on your mind, but when Charlie was talking, I kept thinking about you because I know that you have seen the good and the bad.
And that's the truth.
Right.
There are a couple of things that hit me. Number one, this is all behavior modification.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And at least to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to see anybody think that we have a society that requires behavior modification. I think they are out of touch. I think that, and if I'm off base here, just tell me to go a different direction. But I think with the reality that people are less, people have less money, and especially in your urban areas. And I know that this isn't a 100% statement, and I don't mean it as an excuse. But you have people that are working not just one job, but 2 or 3 jobs. You have both parents working. You have homes where there's no parent, but you have grandparents. And there has been the concept that teachers in schools are I think it was called the parentis loci. The parent, that teachers assumed a parental role. And I think your really sharp teachers, your good teachers, do display that parental involvement with kids. They know when a child is behaving differently than normal. They recognize that there's some things that aren't the way they should be. But they've always had, at least in the schools that I've been in, we've always had resources where we could work with a kid, we could find somebody who would work with that kid who was qualified to do that without taking time and away from the classroom setting, and without having that frustration going on all the time. I think, and a lot of the work that I did, especially in L.A., was directly with gangs. And that was a whole different culture. And so there's some things there that we did that do fit in with social and emotional learning. but it was to make learning in the classroom possible.
Right.
It was designed to support kids, to support teachers, so that the classroom was a place where kids could learn to read, write, and do math and learn history. Somewhere along the line, somebody in academia or in some other political setting has bought a load of turkeys. And that's not a very professional way to put it. But you're really solid teachers, and I was blessed to work with so many of them. And the principals, we knew our kids. We knew our teachers. And we knew how to make things work. And it wasn't always easy, but it wasn't somebody from the outside indicating what our school or our classrooms were going to look like. Our classrooms became their own society. And they had standards for social behavior right from the get-go. And once those behaviors or expectations were established in the proper way, kids knew what was expected, and they worked with you. Kids will always know what's fair versus what's not fair. They also know when they're being manipulated and when they're not. I think the schools are reflective now of a larger societal change.
And can I still jump in a second?
Sure.
Yes, please do.
Well, first of all, let me concede something up front. I'm all about supporting kids, so don't get me wrong. I'm not out there saying that's not the issue. As an educator, I fully believe in the importance of taking care of kids and making sure that they're done right. But by the same token, I also believe in something very, very important, and that is personal responsibility. And under the system, we remove that from them by helping them make every single decision or incentivizing them to do it, whereby we remove the personal responsibility from them. And I'll take myself as an example. As a person of poverty, you check a box. Hispanic, check. Poverty, check. First language Spanish, check. Illiterate parents, check. Father deceased at 7, check. You pretty much name a category by which I would be considered at risk, and I could probably check them all. But yet I understood very importantly once I was working in the fields that I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to do this.
Right.
And that's what incentivized me to try to get out of the current plight that I was in.
May I add something?
Yes.
One of the schools that I worked at in L.A., and there were several of them, we built a culture. It was a very large high school, and you would probably recognize the name of it if I said it. But the adults, believed in the kids. And this was back when there was a zero policy. And I know there's a lot of conversation about that. But we made that high school its own community. And it took work. But you could ask any kid on that campus what the major expectations were, and they could give it to you. And when people came to visit, they could tell the visitors what our major expectations were. And they were really very minimal. But it took the school community, and I'm going to include the neighborhood community, our attendance area, becoming a community and becoming a family. And that was a lot different than having all the technology in the world to do it for you. There's no amount of technology that's going to replace personal interaction.
Right.
And I know that our principal was absolutely fabulous in his expectations. And he trained all of us. He trained the kids. He had the teachers. Just understanding what you're talking about, Charlie, that kids have to see the value in what they're doing and why they're doing. what we expect and why we expect it. And I will tell you that that campus went from being hell on earth until the year that I left. There were absolutely no fights, none of that stuff. And it was because there was direct input and working with kids and families. It did not take an outside governmental agency to come in and tell somebody how to do it.
One of the things I want to, and because you and I have talked about this, Carol, and I want to get Charlie's take on this as well, because I think that this is key, is one of the things that, as I remember you telling the story, that one of the principals said is that we are going to bring in, algebra and pre-calculus.
Called me into his office one day. And I was an AP at that point, and he called me into the office, and this was back when we had the old, what was called a master schedule board. And that master schedule board was this big holding. You remember that, Charlie?
Still exists.
And it has all the teachers' names, and they're up there by department, and then there's these little cards that go in it. And he brought me into his office one day, and he said, and my name then was Stoner, he said, "Stoner, take a look at this. What do you see?" And there was every kind of basic algebra and basic math on that board that you could possibly find. And he said, "Now watch what I'm going to do." And he started taking those cards out and writing algebra on them. And by the time he was finished, I think he had either 34 or 43 sections that he had designated as algebra classes. No more ABC math, no more. And
sections, a lot.
Yeah, and no more YM math. And then I said to him, "When does this take place?" He said, "Monday." And this was like Thursday or Friday. And I said, "So what are you going to use for books?" He had already ordered Saxon books out of his own pocket. And we went over to the book room, and we unpacked those books for distribution on Monday. Now, you don't find a principal being able to do that these days. And I think where I want to go with this is there's so much personal interaction all the way around, through whether it's through regulation or technology or whatever it is, that school people aren't able to have the real kind of hands-on interaction with their programs and their kids and their families the way that we did just those few years ago.
And I think that's such an important story, because it's the same exact story that Nikki Hayes talks about when she was it was when she was in Seattle, is that their principal decided that's what they were going to do. The PTA funded the textbooks, and they brought it in, and these were kids that they said couldn't learn that kind of math. That's the thing. I think we are taking away that kind of local control, and we're taking it away and putting in place all of this social, emotional, and these government grants and programs to fix these kids, when it's the people that know them the best that know what those kids need.
Let me share a story with you. Honest to goodness, happened on Monday. I was driving to go meet the lieutenant